Can't believe I actually did it, but I finally fixed my setup. Hello everybody, my name is Brooklyn, otherwise known as the Dramatic Otaku, and welcome to this bi-monthly series known as the Weeb wrap-up, where I basically wrap up all of the manga and anime that I have watched or read in the last 2 months. This, as the title states, being for July and August, winter months here in Australia. I had a lot of seasonal depression, and thus at first I thought there wouldn't be a lot for this video until I got to the last week of August, that is, because as you can see, I got a bit excited, and that's not all of it. I pulled out my bookmark. Pretty much in this month, or this bi-month segment, I bought so much manga, and I bought it all secondhand. As you can see, these are all of like really old comics, and the highlight of this Weeb wrap-up, if you haven't seen by the thumbnail, is Urusei Yatsura, and I've slowly developed an obsession with this fucking series. But all of the manga that you see on my currently reading shelf isn't ones necessarily that I'm currently reading. It is a whole bunch of different manga, but we will be talking a lot about these bitches, but not before we talk about the anime portion of today's video, as this will be the shortest bit of the entire fucking video. So, July anime. I watched a total of 2 movies. First, to start off with, is the Ghibli film Only Yesterday, as that has sort of been my goal for the last couple of months, is to watch all the Ghibli movies that I can, because in July the newest Ghibli film came out, which is supposed to be Miyazaki's final film. However, it came out in Japan, not here, so I didn't get to watch it. So instead I watched Only Yesterday, which I have so helpfully described as a very quaint film, something very refreshing to watch on a rainy day. However, I did not think it was the greatest film out there and nearly fell asleep in it. It's not got a huge overwhelming story, and I was going through a very fatigued point of time when not only reviewing this, but watching it. You kind of just put it on either for the artistic value, or as I said, it's a rainy day, you're sick and you need something that's not super overwhelming to put on. Something that's a little bit nostalgic. I thought it was okay. I gave it maybe a 5 out of 10. Now the second film that I watched, this being finally My Hero Academia World Heroes Mission, which I think, World Heroes Mission. So, starting off with the synopsis of this film, a cult who believes in the doomsday theory of this series, which, if you didn't know, it's the quirk singularity or whatever. They believe in that theory. There's a cult who believes in that theory. They try to kill the top heroes of the world and plant toxins around the world, meaning our teenage heroes need to stop it. Deku somehow gets caught in a smear campaign because he accidentally has intelligence on how to stop the cult, and we have just dragged a random civilian who does not like heroes into the mix. This sounds like such just a common trope, not only for this series, but for most superhero series, but especially this one. And this film does get played out a bit like a buddy cop movie, which again is another really played out movie trope, movie plotline. I don't necessarily mind that kind of trope. I just don't see why it was made in this film and why this film was made. It's very on par with the first My Hero film, but a major disappointment having seen the second My Hero film, which I remember seeing the advertisements and all this shit, like all of this on like YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, all that sort of shit, back when this came out. And then silence. Like, when the second film came out, everyone was fucking losing their shit over the movie. When this came out, silence. Because we thought it was going to be about Todoroki, Deku, and fucking Bakugo. It's only about Deku and a random other guy who we don't really see in the advertisements. To give it its props, at the very beginning, the art style alterations are a little bit weird, but also kind of impressive. So it goes from regular to super basic in some of the moving shots, which, while still semi-impressive, is nowhere near as impressive as prior movies doing similar sequences, or the actual series itself. Like, it's kind of a downgrade from the actual animation put into the series, let alone what happened in the second film. It does not feel like it should be a theatrical release. But to give it its props, the first scene that they have with the arrow chick, really good. That was actually pretty fucking phenomenal. But action shots after that are just really weird, especially the final fight, which was dragged on for so fucking long. It did not need to be that goddamn long. Next, these are all dot points. First of all, Midoriya running after the train in the first couple of scenes was so fucking funny. Legitimately, that got a strong laugh out of me. Some of the action sequence are just visually very hard to follow. Again, I was in a very fatigued state when watching this, so some of the scenes, I still think now I would find it difficult to follow, but definitely then, when I was getting very stimulated by things, very, very hard to follow. This is a plotline fucking, what's it called, critique. Where are the other heroes from other countries? There's this big terroristic threat happening in over 25 countries, and you are sending Japanese high school students and the top heroes of Japan to be the ones who sort out that issue. The only country that has proper heroes in this fucking series is America and Japan. Where are the heroes from other countries? They do not make an appearance. And I don't know what world building that is, where these young heroes go to other countries that seemingly don't have other heroes, but have been vaguely gestured to have other heroes in them. Why is All Might like the hero of heroes around the world, and every single thing in the series goes back to him? Where are the other heroes in this goddamn series? In other countries, basically. Not as good as the second film. There's a very, very predictable bait and switch in this film. I can't remember what it is. I think it's the final reveal of what the fucking guy who hates heroes quirk is. Out of all of the fights in this movie, Bakugo's is the most visually impressive. Too bad it doesn't really do anything for the film. You know whose does? Deku's. Deku's fight was the most repetitive and simultaneously the most on par fight with his in-series counterpart. And that is not a good thing, especially if this is the big bad boss. This should be a spectacular fight. This is repetitive, boring, and we've seen Deku do it thousands of fucking times before. Oh, speaking of, in this fight, Deku is like talking about the power of heroes and friendship and all that. He sounds like a caricature of himself. Genuine caricature of himself. Usually, Yeah, he's got the whole, and we're gonna fight because we're the heroes and we're the good guys thing. Take that, put it up to 350. That is what Deku is in this fucking film at the end. It was just so weird. Weirdly, like, up there, you know? At some point, the Arrow villain just kills herself. You could have used her throughout the entire film, but you killed her off. She was one of the more interesting characters. I also didn't like how the film held back on Rhodey's quirk for so long, for such a dumb quirk, of which my girlfriend predicted really early on. So it's predictable. You held on to it for way too long, making the impact of the reveal so stupid. Like, you could have revealed it when Deku brought it up, but no, you left it for half an hour and then told us, which I'm not the most appreciative of in the actual series itself, but at least in the actual series itself it pays off. And finally, as I said, this plays out like a buddy cop film. If it was that, it is an absolute shell of a buddy cop film, because too many characters, too many plot lines, but at the same time, nothing. It is a shell, an actual shell of a film, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I honestly gave this a 4.5 out of 10 because it does have its moments. Some of the scenes are really fucking funny, like Deku chasing after the train, because that is such a Deku thing to do. But when other portions of the film that are supposed to be serious turn into a caricature, and there's build-up where there doesn't need to be build-up, or it's not the type of scenario where build-up is the best way to go. It is so difficult to, like, think of this film as nothing more than an extended episode of the series. It's like, or non-canonical episode of the series. And even then, the series does its characters better than this film does. Like, sure, Deku going on his little emo arc in the most recent season, yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of that, and I think the whole season, or the latter half of the season, was a bit of a joke. But compared to what I watched in that film, I would take the stupid season over that film, because that film really didn't need to be there. And I actually think if it had been made into the actual series, it would have been done a better justice. It's genuinely a huge letdown after the second movie. And really just feels like they're honing in on that fucking cash cow of My Hero Academia. But that was all of the anime that I watched in July. So let's get into August with our only entry, Laputa, the Castle in the Sky, which I also purchased, finally. So I am a little bit of a contrarian when it comes to watching popular anime. And I usually wait until said anime is either no longer popular or has finished airing to start watching. However, when it comes to a cult classic, and I hear so much fondness about it, especially if it's a film, I tend to hold off on watching said piece of media even more. And so I'm just like, usually not interested. When it came to Castle in the Sky, was my initial thinking. I was very much a contrarian, didn't really want to watch it. I thought, no, Totoro, Grave of the Fireflies, Howl's Moving Castle, those are like the ones that I need to watch. Castle in the Sky it's just gonna be another Spirited Away where it's like hyped up so much and then I just don't like it. Because I don't think it's like super enjoyable. Honestly, after watching only yesterday, I now understand why Spirited Away is like one of the most critically acclaimed Ghibli movies. But like, I thought this was like similar, where people sort of hyped it up so much and it really wasn't in my taste preference. Because that's what Spirited Away was for me. So many people hyped it up, I watched it and it really was not my taste. But when I actually watched this, I realized everyone saying all these good things about Castle in the Sky were correct. Genuinely, I had a really good time watching this movie. Like, I didn't realize it would be this exciting and this jovial and cartoony, because usually like Ghibli films are very artistic and have like a deep message. This straight up cartoon, and I love that. I genuinely actually love that. I watched the English dub of this for the last like 3 entries, watched the English dub because that's what I could process in these last 2 months. The English dub for this is so fucking funny and it's like quintessential 80s cartoon, and like, I love that for this. Not even like quintessential 80s cartoon. It is like good 80s cartoon voice acting and genuinely a fun time. When it came to the characters, I ended up really liking the pirates and their sons. I thought they were so fucking funny. Even a little bit creepy with all the bride stuff, but in the end, I really enjoyed them as characters, as well as our 2 protagonists. And like, this has very quickly become one of my favorite Ghibli films. I genuinely think this is very reminiscent of old cartoons that I would watch and older dubbed cartoons, and that's probably what I really like about this movie so much, that it's just fun. I also didn't realize the song that I haven't watched this that fucking much, that he sings at the start, the pigeon song, is referenced in Your Lie in April. I had no clue that the Your Lie in April thing was a reference to this, and now I know, and it's so fun learning that. But yeah, genuinely really like this. The more that I think about like the movie and how I felt in it, the more fondness I feel, honestly. So originally I was going to give this a 7 out of 10 because I do still have my lulls about the film. There are some points where it feels like it's going on too much, or I feel like the fate of Laputa could have been different and I would have liked it to be different, but it's a Ghibli film, it's not going to go the way you fucking want. 7.5 to 8 out of 10 for this film. Genuinely really like it, and all the positive things you hear about this film, 100%, definitely. If you haven't seen Laputa, I would highly suggest this. And now that I've been on my rant that was definitely supposed to be much shorter than it was, we move into July manga. July manga is quite small, with only 1 series, but 2 volumes of said series. We are going to be talking about My Love Mix-Up again, and we're going to be talking about volumes 5 and 6. So, volume 5, for a series that I've noted as being unmemorable in the past, as it really feels like every other romance novel, volume 5 of My Love Mix-Up really stands out. I don't know if it's because I've just been in the perfect headspace for sweet rom-coms, or something changed about the storytelling of the actual manga itself, but this volume really made me giggle and feel warm and fuzzy and just gushy inside. I tend to forget how funny My Love Mix-Up can be, and how it's a nice, warm-hearted romance on top of also being a funny comedic story as well. I think what changed in this volume is I can never say this bitch's name. Aoki and Ida's official start to their relationship. They're working out the kinks, and Ida is finding himself becoming more jealous. Aoki feels less annoying as a character in this volume because he actually has a decent support system that understands the things that he maybe necessarily won't about himself, and he feels more like a competent character in this goddamn series. For being the protagonist, he's been pretty fucking annoying sometimes. Anyway, this volume is pretty standard as Aoki plans for his future, has to go to cram school, and starts a part-time job. The main contentions being his prejudiced tutor for cram school and their new co-worker at his work. I think this volume succeeds in the fact that Aoki is put together somewhat. He's not blabbering like an idiot like in previous volumes and has clear goals and intentions for this volume. Instead, in this volume, the romance floundering is left to Ida. He has to deal with jealousy for the first time and anger towards people who are harming his partner. The B-plot is the Valentine's chapter with Aida and Hashimoto, which is these two idiots on the front, and their rocky relationship as well, but we don't dawdle on it for too long, which I also appreciate since I got into the series for these two fucks. Anyway, solid volume, definitely need to keep collecting this series, and if I hadn't bought all of these fucks, well, these fucks, all of those fucks, and this volume down here, as well as these fucks here, I honestly could have, but no, I had to buy a shit ton of secondhand fucking manga. Anyway, volume 6, My Love Mix-Up. This is a lot shorter. This volume, we explored more of Aoki and Ida's relationship. Fucking shocker. I will admit, this was less eventful than the last volume, but I'm still kind of invested in this series as these two volumes have got me hooked into really wanting to read the next two volumes. As I said, if I had not bought all of these, then I probably would have, and I'm still very, very, focused on getting volumes 6 and 7. I want to get them at the same time, hopefully, but we'll just have to see because I am currently saving for Manga, which is going to be in November. And now we can talk about August manga because I weirdly have a lot to talk about, which I didn't think I would when I started this month. Okay, so we're going to start with an update on Chainsaw Man, which I had intended to do before reading essentially 6 volumes, because these are omnibus fucking volumes of manga. Essentially 7 volumes of manga in one sitting, which, to be fair, I'm still reading this one. This one isn't getting reviewed today, but these two, yeah, I fucking read those. I already wrote it down in my review. I'm just gonna fucking say it. So, Chainsaw Man chapters 137 through 139. Okay, so I know I don't like doing this, but with my priorities on script writing for this month and my fear of this video being the shortest Weeb wrap-up yet, I will be talking about the latest Chainsaw Man chapters, excluding 140. Also, since I haven't talked about Chainsaw Man for a while, so it's hard to explain what's going on in the series thus far, and we are also kind of in a very frustrating part of the series, where whenever we take 2 steps forward, we take about 8 steps back. So I was actually really enjoying the Asa and Denji shipping, but no, they fucking took that back real fucking quick. Basically, in this series, currently the threat of the Nostradamus prophecy hangs above the world, and the devils know that the prophecy being fulfilled depends on Chainsaw Man living or dying. The Chainsaw Man Church is involved, and from what I'm understanding, they are the bad guys. Asa is also kind of being used, but in these 2 chapters, we meet Fumiko Mifune, Denji's new bodyguard in disguise from Special Division 7, another new devil hunting division, as well as another weapons devil from the arc prior, Swordman, who we saw but really didn't know the identity of, and just to be clear, it's this guy, not to be confused with the Katana Man. His name is Mirisugo. He is the newest kid in class and tries to recruit Denji into the Church of Chainsaw Man, as he's thankful to Denji for killing Makima and setting him free. Denji mostly denies the offer, but Denji's priorities are Denji's priorities. Each and every chapter of the series ends with another new plot twist, and while I do still like the series, it can get super fatiguing at the same time with some of the endings, especially when they don't really lead anywhere in the next chapter. However, some of the endings, like chapter 139, are appreciated, not cliffhangery, and in most cases often comedic. Obviously, you already know my thoughts on Chainsaw Man, but I just wanted to update you guys on what was happening in the series and my personal opinions on the series before we get into the actual meat of this fucking video. That being Urusei Yatsura. So, I have had this volume for fucking ages because I saw it in Minotaur after I had bought, or as I was buying volume 2 of Urusei Yatsura, but I only recently got volume 3 of Urusei Yatsura, and I think I've had these two, I've had this one since I want to say, not June, oh actually maybe June. I think I bought this when I went on that big manga buying spree, when I had my little me date in the city. I'll have to double check that video, but I think that's when I bought volume 3 of Urusei Yatsura. I bought it from Minotaur, and so finally I was able to get both volumes, and I didn't fucking read them until August. So that is a solid 2 months that I've had these sitting on my desk, being like, I'm gonna read them, I'm too bored, I can't read them. Because these are notoriously hard to get into, but once you get into them, it's incredibly hard to fucking stop. So I didn't previously have this. I bought it last week because me and friend Mia, friend of the channel, we went into the city just to go have lunch after work one day, and we were just walking and talking and catching up in person. We just took a little detour down to Minotaur just to look. Once you start, you cannot fucking stop with this series, and I'm hoping that I will be good to pause on this series so I can read the rest of these fucks that I bought in this goddamn month. Anyway, Urusei Yatsura Volume 3. In this volume, we hit parts 5 and 6 of the series, and I've noticed for some reason, it really seems like Shinobu has been written out of the story in favor of some more moments with LUM and Ataru together. She shows up a lot less and only really in scenes where there is other women that Ataru is harassing, like with Sakura. Which reminds me, part 5 is basically a beach episode for the latter half of that portion. The opening half is mostly about Sakura, the shrine maiden turned school doctor for some fucking reason. But the thing is, Cherry is her uncle, and he is also really lacking in this, much like Shinobu, and the pair only really appear in the beach episode part of this volume. Then of course, in this volume as well, we finally see LUM become an actual student of the school Shinobu, Mendo, and Ataru are attending. A new teacher character is also introduced in this volume, as well as another alien dame for Ataru to be seriously harmed by, because he is still just a horny fucking bastard. In this volume in particular, I really liked the ongoing joke of Cherry and Ataru using Mendo, or trying to like schmooze up to Mendo as if he's like related to them, or like they're his best friend or something. That's a really funny ongoing joke that I really liked. Honestly, for such a simple joke, it's executed so well and I really love it. For this series itself, particularly in this volume, I would have really liked to see more serious plot developments occur, as the seriousness in this series is on a very episodic level right now, but I can hold off on it at the moment. I was a fan of Kaguya-sama after all. Also, Ataru, for some fucking reason, I realized as I was reading, really reminds me of Pingu. So that was volume 3. moving on to volume 4. So volume 4 of Urusei Yatsura, this volume was really enjoyable and easy to read. Unlike all the volumes prior to this one, the story obviously continues from the last part, and in the last part, as I mentioned, we had a lot of Shinobu erasure. This continues in this part, particularly in part 1 of this volume, not so much in part 2, where the first time that Shinobu actually pops up in this volume is in chapter 3 and is there for a singular frame in chapter 3, labelled Ataru retires. And Shinobu's presence really only regains prominence within the last 3 chapters of the novel. We also get to meet Ten in this volume, and he's such a fun little character. In one of the chapters involving Ten, which is closer to part 2 of this volume, I honestly really like it because it is a parody of the series with a human girl being infatuated with Ten and him not being happy with it at all. It is honestly one of my favourite chapters, seeing as Ataru subjects Ten to the same torture he has to feel with LUM pursuing him and him not feeling the same affection for LUM, or so he thinks. And there's just this one page that is just so fucking funny to me, and it will never not be funny to me because it's just the irony of it all. I honestly adore it. Moving onward from Urusei Yatsura, we go on to a surprising development in one of my favourite BL manga, that being Dekoboko Bittersweet Days. So as I said, I went on a lunch trip with Mia and we made a little impulsive little detour down to Minotaur, and as we went and looked at the giant manga wall in Minotaur, I noticed there was 2 new boards, an adult content board and a queer board. And I noticed this mainly because the horror board was gone and was replaced with the adult content board, and all of the horror stuff had been moved into a small shelf. I pretty much ended up perusing the queer board because I figured it was a gold mine to find new queer manga that I probably would have walked by on the actual main big manga wall. As I was perusing that wall, I see Dekoboko and I'm like, oh, that must be Dekoboko Sugar Days. But then I noticed Bittersweet and I'm like, is that a translation difference? Did my copy of Dekoboko Sugar Days get mistranslated? It took me a solid 2 minutes to realize, oh no, not even 2 minutes. It took me about half a second to pause and go, oh my god, my favourite BL has a sequel. Dekoboko Bittersweet Days, I had to walk out with this. I had to. Dekoboko Sugar Days is one of my favourite gay manga ever. Now, I didn't know what I would be expecting from this, especially since I thought the first volume wrapped up very, very nicely. But this sequel is very, very much more lewd than the first volume. The first volume had 1 chapter at the very end of the novel that was very lewd. So many chapters. It is definitely filled with more sexual scenarios between our main 2 characters, which, when my favourite thing about this series was the soft romantic elements of the first one, it was a little bit of a switch. The biggest takeaway I got from this manga is that it's kind of got the Oran formula, that being that one party is part French, grandmother is in France, love interest has to convey their feelings so that the part French character stays in a long distance relationship with them, which I don't mind necessarily. But this volume certainly isn't as good as the first volume. I do really like it. It is cute, and it does make me nostalgic for when I read the first edition of this. I just preferred the first volume and the first story in general. I liked the first volume because it was more sugar, and this is bittersweet. So yeah, I do think that if you do like Ouran and the Ouran manga and how that ended and sort of wanted to see it from like a boys love perspective, that's considerably more shit, then maybe pick this up. The next manga, this came off the horror list. If you do not know what the horror list is, it is a list of manga that I have been suggested from multiple videos on MangaTube about what horror authors to read from, what series to read, and what short series to read as well. I picked out the most interesting ones or the most popular ones. They are on my list, and I have been trying to annihilate my way through that reading list. This manga's name is Fetish, and it came off that list. That was not a pun. Straight off the bat. Searching fetish manga on Google, probably should have seen that coming. Plus, it being tagged josei and romance, I was honestly excited to read it. Personally, I liked that this book had a trigger warning at the very beginning of the story. So, off the bat, this novel is so much more creepy than erotic horror. Going into this, because it was labeled josei, horror and romance, I thought it would be similar to erotic horror, which to my memory was shoujo horror. So with this specific volume being josei, I didn't know what I was walking into, so I was basically basing it off of erotic horror because it is in a similar structure to erotic horror. This was genuinely more horrific, and when I say horrific, I mean creepy, which I actually really appreciated in this novel to some extent, and we will get into that when we break down each and every story. Where erotic horror was very romantic, this is much more creepy. So going into the actual stories itself, the first story, whose name sort of eludes me, was a little bit underwhelming for my personal tastes. It was very on par with erotic horror, but the second story, Love Letter, is really good, playing on seeing one's phantom self and stalking, very much being similar to the likes of that one Junji Ito story. I think it's The Infinite City, where at the very start of that story, the protagonist goes to move in with her aunt because her family is poking holes through her room to stare at her at night and creep on her. Love Letter, very similar to that. Very, very similar. And I actually really liked it a lot. Now, the next fucking story. All of Silly Lily. Freud would have just fucking adored this one. I hate it. 100% hate it. It started off great. Before any context of what was going on, when we find Lily being held captive in this story with the threat of her labia being torn off, ooh, gross, horror, gore, love it, disgusting, felt it, ugh. And that's all you're gonna know about the story, which was my first impressions of like the first scene of the entire thing before the context, because in my initial recording I did give the full context of what happens in that story, and it made me physically ill to write it, it made me physically ill to read the actual story itself, it made me physically ill when recording it, and upon editing it is also making me physically ill. So I hate it. I hate this particular story, and the main reason is because it is incest, pretty much. Like, Professor makes a clone of his daughter, then you can sort of piece together what the fuck happens. So don't read it. No. Let's go into another story. Yuck. Disgusting. Then is the next story, Airport, which I just love. It's great. Yeah, it's so much better than the last one. A good short one to recover from whatever the fucking hellhole that the last one was. There's a man who owns a taxi who is freaking out because his heavily pregnant customer is miraculously not pregnant anymore. And he is having flashes of where this newborn baby was left. And then he turns behind him. And then the next story, the namesake of the entire book, Fetish. The namesake of the story, creepy guy has a fetish for injured women and pursues a teenager who is heavily injured. Creepy genuinely would have been okay if I could recover from Sully Lily. Overall, if we could take out the Sully Lily story of this volume of fucking short stories, I would be fine. This would be a half decent fucking series. Would I still be a little bit grossed out by Fetish? Yeah, but it wouldn't have been half as bad. Well, this one clearly isn't half as bad as all of Sully/Lily. Just take out that story, please, because that's genuinely stomach churning, like disgusting. If we were able to take out the Sully/Lily story, I would be fine. This would probably be similar to erotic horror, and I would have been able to recommend it. But the Sully Lily story gave me such a level of psychological damage that I cannot recommend it to anyone, which is a shame because I think some of the stories are actually half decent. It's just that one that ruins it, and it starts off in such a good way for horror and just declines so fucking fast. It's also annoying that that story is the longest one in the set of stories, and that every character in each additional story is basically just a recontextualized version of the last. This series gets a 5 out of 10 solely because of Sully/Lily. It is such a gross story. Like, it started off well, ended terribly, abysmally even. Otherwise, the other stories could have had 7 or 10, 7 to 8 out of 10. It's a good level of creepy or gross. And what benefits the other four stories in this set is that they can be very similar parallels to real life in them, making that extra level of creepy. Save the supernatural elements of visions or people slipping out of reality into limbo. Things like spousal abuse, stalking, mothers leaving their newborns to die in public places, men fetishizing anything about a woman, and being manipulated into those kinds of abusive relationships is all very real and horrific things that I thought were portrayed decently in a short story series, but that they could also have been expanded upon further. I also like that the protagonist of each story is always varying from male to female as the protagonist role, and how both can be the cause of something horrific to occur. But Sully Lily had just pushed me to the fucking it just had to push the fucking envelope on that concept. And I'll give it to the series. It is certainly horrific. Downright disgusting. Just, Fetish was very disappointing. 4 out of 5 of the stories are great. One of them starts off in a great way and ends off making me feel physically ill. So, I can't recommend Fetish to you, unfortunately, unless you want the single one-shot, but even then, that one's just a mediocre story that feels like it's been spoken 100 times if you are a woman, so. And because I really wasn't in the mood to do a half-decent outro, we have this outro, so thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys, in some way, enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I will see you all next week. I hope you have an amazing day or night, and I'll see you next time. Bye!
you.